All right, we are back. It is time to break down the waiver wire here heading into week 3 of the NFL season. We have some really appealing options to talk through. So let's go position by position and then give a deep sleeper for the people later on down the road. Let's start at quarterback here, Boone. Run me through the options for this week.
So this one, it's going to feel boring to start with the same guy that I started with last week, but I don't think it's boring at all because when I recommended Daniel Jones last week, I was telling everyone, you're going to pick him up. We love what we saw in week 1. He's running the ball. He looked confident in that offense, and yet he's got to go against the Broncos in week 2. So don't play him this week, but then you'll have him for the rest of the season. Well, he comes out in week 2, has another great game, right? Like he put up good stats against the Broncos. He's still running the ball. He's still scoring rushing touchdowns. And that offense looks really, really good. So I am excited about Daniel Jones. Never thought I'd be saying that after week 2. But man, he's put up 300 passing yards on the Broncos. Man, I don't know. It feels wrong, I know, but heading into the Monday night doubleheader, he's the quarterback 7 on the week. He was the QB2 overall last week. Like, he is getting it done in a way that I think is going to put him in the low-end QB1 conversation for potentially the rest of the season. Don't you think? Am I crazy to think that Daniel Jones could do this again? Because remember, I mentioned this last week, he did this a few years ago with the Giants where he was a low-end QB1 in fantasy points per game.
And this offense does suit him really well. Like all of the RPOs, the quick decisions. I mean, I mentioned this with Chris Allen on the Sunday recap show. He fried the Broncos defense when they blitzed him. I mean, absolutely obliterated them. And that's a good defensive unit too, like a really good defensive unit. So I'm very impressed with what Daniel Jones is doing right now. And I think the biggest difference, Boone, in they're calling him Indiana Jones. In Indiana Jones's favor right now is that 2022 Giants season, there was not a lot of talent around him. Here in Indy, there's a lot of talent. Man, I mean, even think about just like Josh Downs popped back up for a pretty nice game against the Broncos. So like it's just like, oh, Michael Pittman doesn't pop up huge. Alec Pierce is like, oh, well, Josh Downs is involved. Tyler Warren's involved. And Jonathan Taylor is looking like an excellent pick in fantasy football leagues right now. So just so much going for the Indianapolis Colts. I agree with you. He's the clear cut. Like if you lost Joe Burrow, which I did in one league, I'm trying to get Daniel Jones as like my QB1 to just kind of rock with going forward, which is what a crazy bunch of words to come out of my mouth here this early in the football season. Give me some more quarterback options that people can look at.
Yeah, with all these quarterback injuries, we got to find some others. Michael Penix Jr., I've talked about him before. I think he's joined that high-end quarterback too, kind of potentially some weeks where he gets into the QB1 mix. Didn't do us any favors on Sunday night. That was a tough matchup against that Vikings defense, but we just had Drake London come back from an injury. We had Darnell Mooney come back. Let's see these guys get another week removed from those injuries, a little bit healthier, some better matchups coming up. I think Penix has showed us enough so far that he is very comfortable out there, more comfortable than some of the other second-year quarterbacks, that's for sure. And he's got the weapons around him. I've been mentioning Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts looking okay right now. So, yeah, I think this is a situation where Penix Jr. is an option you could go to. You're not going to feel good about having him as your starter long-term, but somebody that you can trust for a short stint when you have some of these other injuries that you're dealing with. And I think in week 3, he's going to be a decent streaming option. Now, if you have to go deeper than that, we got some guys where if their starters are out, you could look to playing these guys. Mac Jones, he's going up against the Cardinals. I mean, had a decent fantasy game against the Saints, right? And we know that Kyle Shanahan offense, they've helped quarterbacks produce for fantasy in the past. 279 and 3 touchdowns for Mac Jones. Again, I know it was against the Saints, but getting a little bit healthier there, having Juwan Jennings back is great. And, even with the injuries, with Brandon Ayuk not around yet, with George Kittle not around, even with those injuries, they're finding ways to put up points. And that's because they have so many talented players in that offense that can make it easy for a guy like Mac Jones. So I think he's someone to look at. We mentioned other guys, and it's getting a little riskier, but Tyrod Taylor is somebody that runs around a little bit still. So if Justin Fields is out this week, you could look to start him, little Konami code type guy. And Marcus Mariota, same situation where if he has to step in there for Jaden Daniels, he's going to run a bit. I mentioned some of the stats earlier in the show that he put up in last year's games when he got some action. I think he will be a fine kind of QB2 guy, not really a crazy high ceiling, but a guy who's going to have a decent floor for you in fantasy just because he's going to run the ball, and they have decent weapons in Washington as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you called out Michael Penix. I have a disturbing amount of Jaden Daniels fantasy teams, and at least one of them, maybe two of them actually, I do have Michael Penix as the QB2, just because like it's a league that, one of them's a guillotine league, so there's like nobody on the waiver wire. And I'm looking at that Panthers matchup thinking like, yeah, those Drake London panic emails are going to age pretty poorly with Michael Penix and Drake London dropping heaters all over the Panthers defense in week 2. And I will say Mac Jones, pretty damn impressive game for Mac Jones. I mean, the play is over if he needs to create at all, but this offense does present answers to you. McCorkle Jones found him, he played pretty well under pressure against the Saints. So I think he's a decent flyer as well. Let's move to the running back position. Boone, doesn't look like we have any like league winners, available right now, but there's some players that we should be highlighting here.
Yeah, I want to mention a few guys. Normally, I just look at players that are under the 50% rostered mark because I don't think there's any point going over that. But because running back has kind of been boring so far, I've last week looked at a guy like Quinshawn Judkins, who was just over that 50% rostered mark, and then he ended up starting last week, which was great, put up some stats there. So that ended up being a good pickup if he was available in your league. This week, we have a few that are also in that range, just above the 50% rostered mark. The first one, Cam Scatterbo, he started to assert himself in that Giants offense. He's slow. Yes, he almost looks like a fullback at times out there, and yet he's running with attitude. He's a factor in the passing game. And we saw the way it was like infectious for the offense, right? Like in that game against the Cowboys, in the second half, he got way more opportunities than Tyron Tracy Jr. And I think a part of it is just because the way Scatterbo runs, the team gets fired up behind him. He found the end zone in this game, went 11 for 45 and a touchdown, also caught 2 passes for 14 yards. The game went to overtime, so that bumps that up a little bit, but still a guy that I think moving forward is going to take over the starting role in New York. So if he's still available in your league, you want to go out and get him. Bashal Tutin, like every fantasy analyst's favorite player. We've all talked about this guy, what he could become in this offense. And I don't think that he's going to come and take Travis Etienne's job right away, because Travis Etienne's playing pretty well right now in that Jags offense. All the other things that we said about the passing game, the running attack is actually pretty good at the moment. So this is one where down the road, if we have an injury potentially happen or over time, maybe we see Tutin take over that job. But in the short term, he showed us he can be a pretty good flex play for you, right? 8 for 42 on the ground, 2 for 32 and a touchdown through the air. So he's got himself into that status where he's an RB3 flex option who has immense upside if something happens to Travis Etienne. He's another guy you got to go out and get. And then the last one I'll mention, Trey Benson, 52% rostered right now, but the opportunities are increasing for him this season, and he's someone else who's put himself into that conversation as an RB3 flex option who has top 15, top 20 upside if James Conner ends up getting an injury at some point. So I just want to mention those guys before we go on and talk about anyone else, because if they are by chance available in your league, you have to be very aggressive and go and get them.
No question. They could all be kind of, if anything happens to the starters. I mean, even Cam Scatterbo might be the starter right now. I mean, he definitely took over the backfield in the second half and overtime. Like that whole, hey, it's Tyron Tracy's backfield report from the offseason, that lasted like 1 week. Even Devin Singletary nominally started over Tyron Tracy in the offseason. I feel like it could go back and forth. Who knows? But right now, Cam Scatterbo's got to be considered the guy to have there in that Giants backfield. Tyler Algier, that's another player you want to mention here.
Yeah. And again, somebody else that's put himself into the conversation is an RB3 flex. And Algier's not going to take Bijan Robinson's job by any means. If something happened to Bijan Robinson, we already know that Tyler Algier is a guy that can step in and put up good stats because he's got a 1,000-yard campaign on his resume back from his rookie season. But I want to mention him because we just saw him have an 80-yard, 1-touchdown effort this week against the Vikings. He gets an even easier opponent next week with the Panthers. Last year in the 2 games against the Panthers, he racked up 177 scrimmage yards in those games, also scored a touchdown. So yeah, this is a spot where you're definitely going to want to play him if you need that RB3 flex in your lineup. And yeah, we're still waiting on, we don't want to see injuries happen, but we're still waiting for injuries to hit. And that kind of makes the running back position a little more interesting for the waiver wire. But at the moment, we're still finding value in some of these guys that might not be starters yet, but can give you some value on the way to potentially being starters if injuries strike.
Yeah, I mean, Raheem Morris apparently told the NBC crew before that game, like, oh, you're going to see what we want to do, and we want to run the football downhill. And that is exactly what they did. And I feel like there's going to be like some games like that this year. And in those games, like Tyler Algier might actually have a little bit of standalone value in addition to being a guy that obviously has massive injury upside. So I like that call out there. Let's move to the wide receiver position. Give me your list of guys there.
All right, two main ones that I want to highlight here. Troy Franklin on the Broncos. This is just his second season. We're seeing him ascend. We're seeing him take that step forward. I think he was a key member of the Broncos passing attack this week. He's really started to emerge this season. 22 years old, post career highs in week 2, 8 for 89 and a touchdown, adds another 11 yards on the ground. Now, part of me wants to be cautious about the Broncos receivers not named Courtland Sutton because they tend to rotate these guys, but it really seems like Franklin is earning that spot for himself. We still have Marvin Mims Jr. being that gadget type guy. Pat Bryant still trying to work his way up the depth chart. And Evan Ingram, who we thought was going to be a factor at tight end, isn't at all. So Franklin has an opportunity here to keep this going. Very, very excited to go out and get him in a good offense with that college connection with Bo Nix, right? So really like that combo. Wan'Dale Robinson, Harmon, I don't know what you want to say about this, the PPR scam. Wan'Dale Robinson.
I got dunked on, bro.
He's killing it, right? So far this year. Last season, right? 140 targets. And what did he do with it? Not that much. This year, picks up where he left off. 18 targets through 2 games. And yet now we're seeing more of a ceiling, right? Week 1, bit of a standard line for him with 55 yards. But this week, 142 yards and a score. They're getting better quarterback play from Russell Wilson. I think you have to be excited about Wan'Dale Robinson. Him and Troy Franklin in that wide receiver 3 flex type mix. Really, really like those guys as pickups this week. Alec Ayomanor on the Titans. I mentioned him, I believe, at the very end of last week's show as a deep sleeper. If it wasn't on this show, it was on Kevin O'Connor's show. But he's a guy who has stepped up here. He's coming on in that Titans attack. And weirdly, almost matching Calvin Ridley's usage in that offense. It's unexpected to see that from a day 3 rookie. And yet in week 1, it was kind of predictable. That's why I brought this up when we've talked about it before, because week 1, it was just 2 catches for 13 yards. So on the surface, didn't look like anything, but he had 7 targets in that game. It's a 28% target share. He ran 82% of the routes in that game. So you saw that he was getting the opportunity. And then this week he comes out, 4 catches, 56 yards and a touchdown. Just a beautiful play. I mean, it was mostly Cam Ward throwing crossbody and finding him in the end zone, but still to see a day 3 rookie come out and get this kind of usage and to actually produce was great to see. Very happy, and somebody that I think you want to go pick up and see if he can keep this going. And then a guy that you might want to stash, and somebody we talked about before the season, but Christian Kirk on the Texans. I think Christian Kirk, when he gets back, is going to be a big part of this offense. They talked about it before the season, that he was somebody that they really wanted to play in 2 receiver sets, in 3 receiver sets out of the slot, and he's been hurt. So when he comes back, I think he's going to get an opportunity. The question is, when is he going to come back? But we're seeing him drop in terms of his rostership, 34% rostered right now. You can grab him for nothing. There's no risk. Throw him on your bench, and when he's healthy, we'll see if he can become the player that he was just a few years ago when he was a fantasy starter.
The only thing I'll add here, besides the fact that I obviously do owe Wan'Dale Robinson an apology and did apologize to him on the Sunday recap show with Chris Allen, Troy Franklin ran a route on 87.5% of the Broncos dropbacks in week 2. That was just the 4th time since week 1 that anyone other than Courtland Sutton has cleared 80% in that like wide receiver, tight end, running back. The other guys, it's Josh Reynolds in week 1 last year, Lil Jordan Humphrey in week 2, Devon Bailey in week 10. None of those guys were on the team, so maybe that means nothing for Troy Franklin, but I liked what I saw out of Troy Franklin quite a bit after going back and charting that game this morning. So I do believe that there's something there. He is somebody I want to be picking up this week as well. Let's talk tight ends here, Boone. Definitely a position where people are going to need some help.
Yeah, quickly want to mention a few here. Juwan Johnson, somebody that last week I wasn't as excited about. He had the huge opener, right? 11 targets, 76 yards, but he had this matchup with the 49ers defense in week 2. I thought that was going to bring him back down to earth, and nope, not at all. 5 for 49 and a touchdown, getting a ton of targets again, 9 targets in week 2. So now he is inside that top 12 tight ends. He has to be with that kind of usage in that Saints offense where they're throwing the ball a ton. So I really like Juwan Johnson. I'll mention Harold Fannin Jr. again. He's 43% rostered. This is one where I hate the matchup. I don't know that I would play him this week against that vaunted Packers defense, but we saw him come out week 2, slightly fewer snaps, but still a pretty good day. Had 48 yards on 5 targets, caught all of them. He's barely going to miss out on his second straight top 12 performance for fantasy. And to have a guy do that as a rookie is impressive. So I think the opportunity is going to continue for him. I think Fannin Jr. is going to be somebody that's going to be in a lot of fantasy lineups throughout this season. And then I'm going to mention him again. We talked about him earlier, but Isaiah Likely as a stash. He's down to just 12% rostered right now. He is going to come back in the next few weeks, maybe even week 3. And when he gets back out there, I think we're going to see a big difference between the way he looks on the field and the way Mark Andrews has looked on the field so far this year. And I think that takeover at the position is going to happen pretty quickly. So likely somebody that could end up inside the top 12 tight ends for fantasy as well as the season goes along.
Love that call out. Yeah, if you're hurting at tight end and like Juwan Johnson and Harold Fannin got picked up last week, Isaiah Likely is definitely somebody I'd be looking at. They want to give him a big contract extension. They want to invest in him. And if he's there for week 3 in that matchup against the Lions, could be a lot of points in that game. Final one here, and this one goes right to my heart, buddy. Who is the deep sleeper waiver wire pickup of the week?
We're thinking ahead here. Jalen Coker, he is an IR stash, just 8% rostered. Xavier Legette, I mean, at this point, they shouldn't even be putting him out on the field, right? Like, he's doing nothing out there with his opportunity. They're using Hunter Renfrow. They're using Bryson Tremaine. Like, they need someone else to step up here. Coker is going to be back within the next few weeks. He'll be back in October at some point. And when he comes back, there's a huge opportunity for him in this offense. So I think now's the time to go get him, throw him in your IR spot, and then let's see when he comes back. You're getting ahead of your league mates. When he comes back, you can see if he can actually emerge as a player that Harmon certainly thinks he can be for fantasy.
Absolutely. This is a guy who beat man coverage as a rookie. Like if they want to keep Hunter Renfrow as a slot receiver, he can play outside. And I do think like they're pretty unserious if they don't at least allow Jalen Coker to push Xavier Legette. He of negative receiving yards on 8 targets and 0.1 yards per route run right now. They'd be pretty unserious if they don't allow Coker to push for that job.